begun. My name is Sutton. I'm the coordinator of a not-for-profit organisation called Equilibrium Future Solutions. We basically are a group that runs social programs and we get people out working in the environment, repairing river systems, building community gardens, doing bush regeneration, just a whole lot of programs that just connect people to land and build communities. So that's pretty much what we're about. And so through that process over the last, 15 years, we've been developing sort of, I suppose, practices and techniques that we use for repairing the environment. And one of the things I really focused on was water. You know, I mean, there's a lot of issues in the environment, but of course water is the key to just about everything. So I really spent a lot of time and energy researching and trying to work out the water systems in Australia. And of course I was lucky enough to meet a man called Peter Andrews, who I saw his program, The Australian Story. And what he was doing really seemed obvious and right to me, so I went and had a work with him for about 5 years, and in that process I kind of got as much knowledge as I could off him, and then I went and started experimenting myself and sort of come up with sort of processes we use now for river restoration and repairing floodplain systems. And so I just want to talk about that, but the reason I'm going to be talking about water is because I know coal seam gas is the issue, but unless you truly understand the water system beneath the ground, you won't really grasp the magnitude of the impact that coal seam gas will be having. So just for the first 20 minutes or so, I just want to try and give you this grasp of landscape hydrology. In this process, I'll show you how a natural system should function, what's happened over the last 150, 200 years that's created most of the problems we have today, how we can then go about fixing or repairing that. And I think by the time I've done that, you'll understand enough that when I show you what's happening under the ground with coal seam gas, it should shock you and make some sense, hopefully. Alright. Alright, just to start, now this is a very complicated process, so I'm going to explain it as simply and as quickly as I can. So bear with me, I'm not going to be able to get everything said in 20 minutes, so we'll try and grasp as much as you can. What you're looking at here is basically a floodplain system. There's the floodplain, and there's the hills either side. You've got the river system of the main flow line, the secondary flow lines, you have wetland systems and the trees. So that's basically just a cross-section of a standard floodplain. Beneath the floodplain you've got sandy channels which run all the way to the bottom. I'll explain how all this forms in a minute. And then the rivers, or the water that flows in the rivers, sinks into these sandy channels, and that's how we fill the floodplain up with water. I just want to describe quickly how this forms, because unless you have an understanding of how it forms, you won't quite grasp it. When you first have a look at this, you notice that the main flow line is at the high point in the floodplain, and we've got these wetlands in the low point in the floodplain. That kind of goes against what people understand, because most of our rivers now flow through deep channels, so you can't really picture them sitting at the high point in the floodplain. But you can still see it every time we have floods. You'll notice that either side of the river floods, and often the river is still sitting out of the water, even though it's sitting in a channel. The banks of the river are higher than the rest of the flood. So that's where we flood across here. So how that forms, well, the reason that forms is basically sediment gets washed off the hills during rain events. As that sediment is washed down into the floodplain, the river begins to meander, so the flow of water slows down. That sediment falls out of suspension, and it's always the heaviest sediment that falls out of suspension first, so you get the large sandy particles. It could be sand or gravel or even pebbles, depending on the strata of the landscape around it. But we're looking at a sandy channel here. So as the normal flow flows, sand is continually falling out of suspension as we hit the floodplain because the flow of water slows, and that builds up sand. Remember, originally the floodplain didn't exist. You used to have the rock strata, so over time, slowly the sandy channel builds up. When we get a flood event, any clay and silt is then pushed out over the floodplain and builds the floodplain up. But because in general flow, the river is building up slightly quicker than the rest of the floodplain, because it's only a flood event that builds the rest of the floodplain, the river always, in every natural system, actually sits as a high point. That's what we call a influence system. In other words, when the river is full of water, the water pressure fills this sandy channel. That water is then pushed out into the floodplain, and influent meaning the water from the river flows into the floodplain and fills up the floodplain with water. So there's a ground table. Even the secondary channels are the same. They build up exactly the same way with the larger sediment falling out of suspension first, so they also have sandy channels, and it's through these sandy channels do we fill the floodplain up with water. If we were to have a normal flow or a normal rain event, the rain would fall across the entire floodplain. However, when you're in a natural state, you have vegetation, or you have forests and vegetation, multi-layered systems, And when you have that, most of the water actually infiltrates into the ground. Very little flows across the surface. So you get high infiltration, and with that, most of the water actually flows into the floodplain through the ground table. Very little comes in as surface flow. So when I have a functioning system, I have water pressure pushing in through the ground from the hills. And I also have water pressure pushing from the high point, which is the river system, out to the edge of the floodplain. These arrows just represent the flows of water under the ground. The lowest point in the floodplain is the edge of the floodplain, and that's where the water will surface. So there's where our wetlands develop. So that's pretty much how you would expect to find most of our floodplains. When you look back on the early history of Australia, when the early explorers were going across the country, they would always meet these massive wetland areas at the edge of floodplains, and actually found it very difficult to even get onto the floodplains. The reeds were so tall that they were taller than the horses and they couldn't even get across. So they were, in all our records, that's how the floodplains were. They talk about having very few trees on the floodplain. The only trees are the ones that ran along the riparian zones. Most of the floodplain was grasslands or wetlands. So that's pretty much what we should have. Can we go to the next photo, please? Okay, the first thing we did when we got out into these areas, and I'm talking as far west as Western New South Wales, it was all wetlands, forests, it was quite an amazing place where Broken Hill is. That was described as by the first explorers as the most fertile country in the world, which is now a salt desert. This is the process that took place when we got here. Basically the first thing we did is we removed the trees, and that's a belief that you can grow crops or grasses or pastures better in full sun, so we remove all of the shade. So we create, pretty much a lot was open woodlands, because the Aboriginals used to burn back and create these massive open woodlands, but we removed the trees to create just grasslands, or single layer, whatever, maybe wheat, grass, whatever we were growing. As soon as you do that, as soon as you remove the vegetation, as soon as you disturb the soil, you take the tree roots out, the soil begins to compact and begins to harden. As soon as that happens, whenever we get rain now, instead of the majority of the water coming in through the landscape, now the majority of the water flows across the surface as surface runoff, and immediately that's changed the whole hydrology of the landscape. Straight away, because I get less water infiltrating, I get a drop in the ground table. As soon as I get a drop in the ground table, these edge wetlands begin to dry out. Go to the next one. As soon as I get the edge of the wetlands beginning to dry out, during rain events, water now flows down to those low points, which were the wetlands. Plants have dried out, they left bare soil, so now when the water flows through these low points, it starts to erode these deep channels, or these channels on either side of the floodplain. That is the first stage of the floodplain hydrology beginning to alter and change. Because what happens now is, remember the river and the secondary channels used to fill the floodplain up with water? Now these side channels act as drains, and they actually drain the floodplain out. So I've now got two drains developing on either side of the floodplain, and basically through that we're losing the water that was in the ground. And of course, as soon as that begins to happen, remember these are sandy beds, or they could be gravel, but predominantly sandy beds. As soon as the water table begins to drop, that sand then becomes movable or erodable. As soon as that occurs, the next big rain event, not only are these side channels becoming deeper, but the river channel itself begins to erode and becomes a deeper channel. Okay, the next one. Of course, over time, and remember it doesn't take much of a flood event, one massive flood can create very deep, quick channels. So we're not talking a long period of time here. From the time that the vegetation is cleared, it could be one massive or only two massive floods, and we've already got to this stage already. Okay? The problem is that when this channel begins to get deep, the ground table now drops even lower. These channels are always getting deeper. As long as it keeps flooding, they get deeper and deeper. And basically what happens then is, of course, the plants on the floodplain can no longer reach the ground table, so the farmers begin to irrigate out of the rivers. Remember when the farmers were first here, they needed no irrigation, no fertilisers, no chemicals, no nothing. The plants just jumped out of the ground. They couldn't believe the fertility. The only way we lost the fertility is because water is fertility. When we lose the water, we lose the fertility. Okay, as soon as they begin to irrigate out of the river, of course, the river water begins to drop again. Okay, the next one.